Just usually, hi, you're listening to the Great Women in Compliance podcast on the Compliance Podcast Network. You're hosted by Emma Lomax and me, Lisa Fine. I am so excited to start a new year of GWIC and even more excited to kick off the year with Lisa Beth Lentini Walker. If you don't know Lisa Beth, first of all, you should, but she is also the Deputy General Counsel, Corporate Legal and Assistant Secretary at Marqeta, and she's also the CEO and founder of Lumen Worldwide Endeavors. There's so much that you've done. And until I started preparing this episode, I don't think Lisa Beth knew that I'm also drafting her for a new role. Before officially joining Team GWIC, Ellen Hunt used to join me once a year for a sort of a State of the Union conversation. Lisa Beth is such a great mentor and friend and advocate that I hope that I can have her take on that role of this yearly type catch up. So thank you so much. Hopefully you are willing to do that and you can just make a show of it if you're not Lisa Beth. But with that, let me just turn it over to you and you can tell us what you're up to lately.
First off, thank you for such a lovely introduction, Lisa. And second, I would be honored, and I can't wait to start an annual update with you and the GWIC team. I gladly accept. As to what I've been doing lately, honestly, I have been focused on living life, which goes in all the different aspects of my life. I've been focused on consistency, and that may not be the most interesting term, but that's my theme word for 2025. As a family, I sit down every year and we think about our things that we want to leave behind, things that we want to move forward with, big goals, aspirations, what it's going to take to get to our goals and aspirations, and how we want to live out our days that we are gifted with in each year. And so consistency has been one that is the main focus for my time and energy. As you mentioned, I have a full life between my professional endeavors as well as my commitments to family and friends. So I've been focused on being consistent in every aspect of my life, whether it's my health journey, which is a daily practice, or my professional goals and aspirations, or the commitments that I have to my family and friends and the communities that I'm a part of. So that's what I've been focused on lately.
That's amazing. I also think that I think a lot about balance. I don't have a word. I'm not as concise as you on that. For my thinking about it, has been my mantra for the last year or so is you're never as awesome as you are on the days that everyone tells you you're at your best, and you're never as bad as you feel on your worst. So there's a little bit of consistency in that, in the way I try to think about it to keep myself on one sort of path. But I think it's really interesting to hear all the different aspects in which you're doing that. And I love the fact that instead of starting with everything related to ethics and compliance or professional, you talk about the well-rounded aspects of life. Because I think all of us forget that sometimes and get super focused on something that's just teeny or important at work and decide that defines our success for the year, the life, whatever. It really often doesn't. But I will, with that, switch over to a little bit about compliance and what you think either for 2025 or what's top of mind for you in those areas.
So, as we're starting out 2025, I'm really focused on agility. There's so much that's happening in the compliance and ethics space. The volume of regulations that our profession is dealing with is pretty massive. And the volume of change that we're expecting, particularly in the United States in the next couple of years, I think it is, we can't understate how
Mhm.
much change is coming our way. And look, I always talk about the gulp rate, which is how much can you swallow at one time? We are maxing out on the gulp rate in terms of change because human beings can only handle so much in any given point in time. So when there is a lot of change, particularly professionally, we need to seek consistency in other areas because we can't handle everything changing all the time. There's not a way for the mind and body to wrap around it. So my goal for 2025 is to make sure that I am showing up consistently, being a voice of reason in every place that I am showing up, because we need some calm in this storm. We need some way to navigate these constantly shifting priorities. And some of that is being centered and grounded in everything else that you're doing so that you can show up the way that you need to for those communities, for that organization, for your family and friends. That has been one of the things that I am focusing on is the rules are going to be changing, the expectations are shifting. When you look at it geopolitically and in the different geographies that you may be working in, there are a lot of differences, and finding things that allow for commonality and allow for you to be able to move your program forward in a way that makes sense for your organization is going to be critical. So, right now, we are all being tasked with being solution finders, with helping to navigate the changes and disruptions that exist just by existing.
Yeah.
So, we have some big work ahead of us, and being prepared for that big work is part of the job, and it's part of what makes us great at what we do.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm finding already, and particularly in the US, with everything that's going on in terms of a change of administration that has a lot of radical changes, is or may, is that we also have, like you mentioned, the rest of the world. So now there's a very, when you talk about consistency, I think lack of consistency is the only consistency in some areas right now. For example, someone in the people in the US will talk about things related to DEI or other things like that. And then at the same time, you have Europe and the UK and others really pushing new regulations that are essentially pushing forward some of those same things. There's a push and pull that you can either try to work through the best way for your organization, or some people will try to politicize either side of it. And it's hard. I think that that's one of the things I think we're all going to be grappling with if you're part of a global program.
Absolutely, but realize that always existed, particularly in pockets. If you look, for example, at trade compliance,
Mhm.
there have always been discrepancies on who's on different sanction lists and how you navigate that. And we can take great cues from people who have been working in FCPA and anti bribery, anti corruption, in trade sanctions. We have always been asked and tasked with finding solutions that will work for organizations. It's just that is going to be a skill that we have to deploy more now than ever before.
Yeah. That's a really good point on it. It's always existed. And also the assuming a positive intent from everyone wherever you stand. I really hope that people don't lose that in it. These are valid viewpoints are always worth discussing and recognizing and being heard. And I hopefully that's a point that we can all try to stay at as different things get tougher, or maybe they won't. Maybe we're all doing that. With that, one other thing that I can't talk to you about when we talk about what's coming up and what are new things with that, you're always a leading edge person. So AI and governance. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then I saw that you were certified by the Women in AI Governance as a founding quantum member. This kind of covers in these few words everything I think about you: cutting edge, supporting women and organizations that should be focused on. Can you talk a little bit about that credential?
Absolutely. I'm thrilled to talk about the credential, and I'm thrilled to talk about what's going on in general. I was very lucky in many respects to know some of the founding members of a group called Women in AI Governance. And this organization was built with an understanding that AI governance is inherently dynamic and will continuously shift and evolve alongside technology, organizational risk appetites, and international regulations. And with that continual adaptation and proactive approach, this group, founded by Shoshana Rosenberg and Emerald Deluy-Gogan, brought together women's voices and championed the contributions of people to technology and regulatory discussions. So we helped to support this and found it because we thought it was really important to keep those voices heard and seen, and to focus in on AI governance because that is a huge growing area. Everybody's talking about AI. Not everybody understands artificial intelligence, what it means, how to manage through the governance and compliance obligations associated with it. There are a lot of deep privacy areas that you need to focus on when you're talking about artificial intelligence and where it's going and where it's growing. And I was very happy to be part of that group. I am part of that group. And I think it's something that every person in ethics and compliance needs to have at least a rudimentary understanding of. This is going to be part of our everyday lives. It's very much like when the internet came into being, there were people who tried to ignore it and said, "I this email thing I really don't need." Now it's become part of the core of our existence. The same thing is happening with artificial intelligence, understanding it, understanding some of the pros and the cons and the how do you manage the ethics and compliance elements of it are going to be part of our jobs. And so we need to understand more. We need to be engaged in the conversation early and often. And so I think it's incumbent on every person working in this space to start getting smarter about what's coming up ahead and how we're going to navigate some of the pros and the cons as we move along.
So, with that in mind, for some of us who are just in the process of educating ourselves, how can we keep learning about it and become more educated? What I will say about that is sometimes I find, even for me, trying to learn more, it's like, where can I start with my initial building blocks before it turns into overwhelming technological thing where suddenly I'm thinking of science fiction movies? What's a good basic starting point or building blocks, for, particularly for ethics and compliance professionals?
I think intentional curiosity is the first best starting point. So you don't need to decide that you are going to get a degree in this or that you need to do anything in particular, but being intentionally curious and starting to become a voracious reader and consumer of information about it is a great starting point. So whether you opt to take a course or you opt to take a session at a conference that you are at, just start somewhere. And there are lots of free materials and resources available. Google, Microsoft, a lot of universities have free courses available for the taking. Just start doing something so you can start learning a little. Read the news articles that are coming out. Not all of them are great, but you'll start noticing the differences between ones that are well written and ones that aren't once you start consuming more content. Listen to the podcasts, start having conversations with people who already work in AI, and look within your organization. Set some meetings with people who are doing this within your organization or within an organization you're affiliated with. Start listening and learning from others, and then you can start engaging more in the conversations.
That's really helpful. And again, I think this, you may have just answered that from saying get educated, but if there's one specific area that you think we should be looking at, what would that be?
I always think a great place for us to grasp onto a little more easily is algorithmic bias. That has a lot of ethical implications. There are a lot of implications around data usage and training sets. So I think that's one of the areas that it's easier for ethics and compliance professionals to find good case studies, to find good examples in the news of the dangers of artificial intelligence. So I like to start there personally, but this is a little bit of choose your own adventure. So whatever calls to you and whatever you are interested in is where you should start
Yeah,
because that's what's going to hook you in and bring your foundational understanding to a point where you can start understanding areas that are more far afield.
Yeah, that's incredibly helpful. I'm trying to do a little bit in a lot of different areas just to keep learning about it. One of the parts that's very interesting to me is coming out of the DOJ guidelines and other things. How do you actually do that, and what's important about how you're going to monitor and what is important for your organization, and as opposed to thinking, okay, I need to know everything about AI tomorrow because that's all anyone's talking about. But it's sort of, what are the specific things that if you're tailoring your knowledge and your interests, that's kind of where I'm going as we kick off the year.
100%. And look, in this space, like you should be a renaissance person. You should know a little bit about a lot of different things and be able to use the area where you have your core training and intelligence, your ethics and compliance skills, bring those to the table as part of the equation. You don't need to be deep in artificial intelligence or, frankly, in any of a number of other areas. You have to know enough to be able to triage with your core skill set.
That the longer I'm in this field, the more that's the most important is the, how can I triage and how can I preemptively triage? Um, and with that, I'm going to change the topic a little bit away from all of your compliance expertise in AI, although it'll come back into this. But a lot of people who listen to this podcast, and a lot of feedback I've gotten is that they have a CECO, a chief role of some sort, as their ultimate goal. And you have given me so much advice, and many of us, over that particular topic. At the same time, when you become successful in the field, you get involved in other issues, and it may sort of change what your professional goals or objectives, or help crystallize as a next step. And so you have done that incredibly successfully because now you're in corporate legal as much as anything else, and you have a CCO at Marqeta. You're a deputy general counsel. Your title's got, governance, assistant secretary, which has governance in it. So let's talk a little bit about that journey, either from where you started in your current company or what made you get there. Because I think that's a really good story and some great information for people.
Yeah, I like to think of my time at Marqeta as it was actually unintentional. When I started out, I was actually helping out a friend and had taken on a maternity leave cover while I was running my business full time. As luck would have it, the situation on the ground morphed and there was an opportunity. And I always say that sometimes the best things in life happen when you least expect them and they were not part of your plan. And it was not part of my plan originally to become deputy general counsel of Marqeta, but I can't imagine a better situation. It just happened naturally. And much of the time we spend going after goals and saying, this is the one thing that I want. This is the one thing that I want. And we become hyper focused on things that may not actually serve us well. My role when I started was to be part of a team. As luck would have it, I have become in charge of the corporate legal function, which is pretty broad. So I serve as the assistant secretary, which means I'm working with the board of directors and helping support all of the committees and the full board. I have responsibility over all of our corporate subsidiaries, our intellectual property, M&A, ESG, or sustainability, whatever you'd like to call it today. I'm also responsible for the code of ethics and handle hotline calls and a whole host of other things. We have a chief compliance officer at Marqeta. He is absolutely phenomenal at what he does and one of my key partners. And it's been a really interesting evolution. I love what I do. And if I didn't love what I did, then I wouldn't be doing it anymore. I'd move on to something that gave me joy in life. But you can do everything. Can't do everything at the same time and do it well. And so I'm really glad for the focus that I have right now with my role at Marqeta and with being able to run Lumen as the CEO of Lumen with a team that I really care about.
And I guess one of the other questions I would have, is it a challenge sometimes, even if you have the most fabulous CCO? I mean, as leaders, I think when you go from doing all of the work sometimes yourself to delegating or having someone else who runs an area, is it a challenge to either let go or see when someone does something differently, feel comfortable. I mean, even if it works out, I just know some of us are a little type A on those things.
Yes, Lisa, I am type A in many things. And one of the things that has been probably the biggest challenge in my career is figuring out when it's okay to let go and when it's okay to move to something else and not be directly responsible, not be that subject matter expert. That's part of that growth trajectory. And I find it even in my own family, having a child who is launched off to college was a big shift because it's no longer my responsibility to make sure that everybody's up and doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. I have to let go. I can't live in Minnesota and be living in Miami at the same time. There are limits to what happens, and as part of that progression, you have to have faith and confidence that everything you've done up to that point stands for itself and that you have done the training and you've done the education that you need for things to work out just fine. Like I spent 18 years raising my son and now it is his time to shine. And if I don't let him do that, I'm not doing a service to him. It's the same at any organization. Like if you set the foundation and you set it well, you have to be willing to say, now it stands on its own. And I think that is a key hallmark of success is being able to build foundations and then say, everyone is ready for me not to be the one who's doing this stuff, for me not to be perhaps even there because it stands the test of time. So that's a huge challenge. And it takes a leap of faith every time. And sometimes that leap of faith is the perfect leap.
And sometimes it can be not so easy, I'm sure, as somebody who wants for the best for everybody. You're reminding me of a quote that my dad loves, and I've sort of adopted it, as he says that successful parenting, which I think you can expand to professional, is giving roots and wings. Roots so that there's something to come back to, and wings so that people can fly on their own. Um,
I think I'm going to have to adopt that
it's a
because
good
I love that saying.
It's a good one. It's a good one. It's a good one. There's some others that, as all parents repeat, no matter what age you are, you kind of are like, I could leave that one, but this one I like. And I think it's really symbolic. I think it's also probably a good way for us to conclude because you do wear so many different hats that you just talked about throughout here and how you kind of work them all together to improve all aspects of things. And then you mentioned your son going to college and he's going back for a second semester. How are you feeling about those roots and wings? And how about the rest of the kids?
I could not be more proud of my son, who's a freshman at the University of Miami. He nailed it. First semester, nailed it out of the ballpark. Not that there weren't challenges along the way, but the challenges are what makes us grow. And to it's important that you navigate all of the challenges, the good times and the bad. And so as he's going off for his second semester, I'm incredibly proud and incredibly grateful that he's been blessed with enough health to do what he wants to do, enough wisdom to know that there are some things he shouldn't do, and the innate intelligence to be successful in his chosen path. And I'm feeling really grateful for a lot of things in life right now. I'm just happy with where we're at and excited about where we're going.
I think that is hopefully the energy we can all take as we start this year. I want to just thank you again for being a part of this community and actually starting to build it so that we can keep growing, especially supporting women in our field. For those of you who don't know, I mean, Lisa Beth is the person who helped me find one of now the key roles of my life in terms of professionally, and I'm very grateful for that. But with that, I mean, just I can't think of a better way to start the year than getting to have this conversation with you. And on behalf of me, Hema, the whole WIC team, and the Compliance Podcast Network, thank you so much and have a great rest of the day and 2025 while we're at it.
Thank you, Lisa. You have a great 2025 too. And for all of the listeners, thank you so much for taking time to listen to this podcast today.